Thanks, Mike, by the way.
You want me to wear a mask?
Look how far she's staying away from you. Sorry. All right, I'll now call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order at 7:12 p.m. Please call the roll.
Ms. Pearson?
Present.
Mr. Rollins?
Here.
Ms. Mohammed?
Here.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Connor?
Here.
Ms. Stanford?
Here.
With 7 present, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll now take a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At the start of each meeting, it bears reminding that the mission of the Rockford Public Schools is to collaboratively engage all students in a first-class education for a changing world. Before we go any further, thank you, Connor. He's working behind the scenes to produce the board's broadcast via Zoom, YouTube live stream, and Comcast Channel 20. We have no petitions or communications, so we're going to move right down to board member comments. Do any of the board members have Mr. Connor?
Yep. I have 2. One is that I didn't want anybody to think that I was protesting anything. I don't have a mask on, and I asked in advance that we are following CDC guidelines. So to that end, I just wanted to say, they say indoors, if you've been vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. So I'm not wearing a mask. The second thing is, I hesitate to say anything, but I just wanted to say to the folks from the union that have been spamming us with all these emails, if you wanted to, I'll speak personally, if you wanted to make me mad, that is the best way. It is people who are outside our district. If you read any of them, virtually everyone was outside the district. So what impression do I have? I have an impression, A, that this letter is based on falsehoods. There are things in there that I don't think are true. And so how effective do you think your message are? I don't know if any of you are here tonight, but I'm just telling you to flood us with emails outside the district is doing the opposite of whatever you think it's doing. So do whatever, knock yourself out. I delete them all because they're signed by people who don't live here and they're saying things that aren't true.
Thank you. Ms. Pearson?
Yes, I just want to acknowledge Lewis Lemon. They did a community walk into fairground housing, which was apparently very successful. And I just want to recognize the principal, Ms. Christina Alford, Mrs. Starla Copeland, Suzette Ramos, James Tillman, and Kayla Mazzari Bankson. Apparently there was a lot of community engagement. The residents of Fairground Housing was very receiving, and they were able to accomplish getting kids signed up for summer school. So I just wanted to recognize their effort and being, I'm sure that there may, no doubt, perhaps could have been some concerns being that it was Fairground Housing, but they band together and they accomplished the task, and I wanted to recognize them. Thank you for your service.
Well, thank you for telling us, because I certainly wasn't aware that that had happened, and it is good to know. Did anybody else have Anything they'd like to say? If not, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Jarrett?
I'm going to cede the majority of my time to Mrs. Detman to share another update on our system-wide framework. We have a couple new milestones to update the board on, but before I do, and while she's setting up, I wanted to tell you that we tried something a little different. Earl Dotson Jr. and I, Chief of Communications, at the encouragement of our entire team, thought that in lieu of having a retirement banquet, which at the time we would have had to schedule, we had really conflicting advice about whether we could pull that off. So we tried something a little bit different, and we took the gift that the district gives to retiring staff and a certificate, and I was able to go and personally thank over 50 retirees over the course of last week, and that culminated today. I had 3 other schools I had to pick up, and it was really, really wonderful to hear about the experiences impacting students. We had retiring people that have worked in our kitchen for over 40 years, nutrition service workers. We had a principal, Mr. Gagliano, who was the champion with 50 years service as a retiring principal, a number of teachers, paraprofessionals with over 40 years of service, 30 plus in many cases. It was wonderful to hear their stories, their experiences on a personal level. So something I think we're going to add to a practice moving forward, and something that I thought was a really valuable use of my time and Earl's time as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Detman, but thank you for all of our retirees for just a wonderful career. They have a few weeks left, but they've really served students admirably, and they will be greatly missed. The floor is yours, Mrs. Detman.
Thank you very much. Tonight, I'm here to share the final in our May series of presentations on the system-wide framework. This will be followed up with a June series, which I'll preview at the end of our presentation tonight. As a reminder, there are multiple questions that need to be answered as we move through this work, and I've highlighted our areas of focus for providing information to make those decisions tonight. The first is blue, it's for A. Does this strategy provide the board with the tools needed to monitor progress toward our district-wide goals in schools? And this strategy is specifically around our quality component, which I'll spend quite a bit of time in tonight. And then under accountability, 5BD, what information will the board need to monitor the standards of service, and what actions will the board take to support mutual accountability between the central office and schools? And that's where we'll spend our time tonight. As a reminder, this is the third in a series for our May board meetings, and tonight we'll really be talking about how all these areas align. Again, a reminder, I will go through these first few slides relatively quickly. I keep them as a standard intro whenever I talk about this work. We have 2 areas of focus as a district: raising student achievement and advancing our equity imperative. Our equity imperative is to create learning environments that work for all of our students and interrupt the predictability of student outcomes based on zip code. Specifically, our equity challenge is that our African American students are furthest away from this now, and our system is not serving our African American students well. Again, we have our current state versus our future aspirational state to have a community of blue and green schools for all families and students. And again, that has launched our work in the system-wide framework for improvement, which does have 4 interlocking components: quality, continuous improvement, standards, which feeds into our system for accountability. We have 3 district goals, and as a reminder, these are our guiding lights. They help answer the question, by how much and at what pace will we raise student achievement? Our goal for EC and elementary is around 3rd grade literacy and to demonstrate a 5% improvement by 2024. Our middle school goal is to create the system for On Track, establish that baseline, demonstrate annual improvement with 5% improvement by 2024. And in high school, our graduation rate and On Track rate will improve to 75% by 2024. So again, these provide the by how much and at what pace for our goals for our system. Tonight, I'm going to provide you a specific update on the accountability portion of this framework. The major question here is, what happens in our district if we have downward movement or a lack of movement? And to kind of visually represent this, again, what I shared in my presentation last time is that we essentially have two halves that create the score for schools. We have the scorecard, which is those measures that are 75% quality instruction and 25% climate and culture. We have the standards of practice, which have practices paired with metrics. That's the purple component. And that yields then the school's status, which puts them into a 3, 4, or 5-year track for improvement. That much has been rather clear. As we've been kind of shopping this idea around with principals and inviting them deeper into the work, the question that loomed large for them, which is our responsibility to answer, is what does mutual accountability look like? And so I'd like to share with you our current thinking on this concept. We believe that mutual accountability really illustrates the concept that improvement is not only on the shoulders of the principal in the school. We need distributed accountability throughout our system, and to really send the message that we are all in on these goals and all accountable for our progress. So we developed a system of an annual cycle of feedback from our schools. Starting in the bottom left of the slide, twice a year, all of our principals and assistant principals will have an opportunity to sort of score each district department based on 2 core components. First are a set of normed questions around customer service and professionalism. And then second are customized questions based on the standards of service. Are we doing what we said that we would do? Do our actions and words match? We would give an opportunity for formative feedback in October. This would be an unscored event in October that would give us a baseline feedback for the year. In the months of November through March, our district departments would engage in action planning and monitoring, and then schools would again have an opportunity to take the survey and provide us with summative feedback in April. That gives us enough time to receive the data, analyze it, adjust, and announce to schools what our changes will be as a result of their feedback for the coming school year. That data then gets fed into our central office evaluations. So rather than having only performance and core values, we would add as a way to measure the summative survey results for each of these departments. So that is our concept at the moment. We just had a focus group with principals today. We'll be asking them to kind of react and respond to this concept in future focus groups. We've developed this over the last 4 to 6 weeks, and we believe that our partner with K-12 Insight, who already has our suite of surveys, has a tool available for us that can meet this need. With regard to the standards, I want to provide some updates here as well. We had launched yesterday in Cabinet the creation of the standards of service. So this will get very real and very concrete very quickly in the next 2 weeks. Again, we believe that pairing supports with practices is a key component for success for this performance framework. I've already updated you on the standards of practice for principals and teachers. You have reviewed those drafts. We've talked through them. What wasn't yet developed was the standards of service. Here's what that work looks like. These are our instructions. I know they're quite small, but I'll talk through them. This is a snip of the instructions that we sent to all of our cabinet leadership. We've organized all of the standards of practice, and we're asking them, where do you fit? How can you help? And if you can't find specifically a standard of practice, then look at those commitment statements that we've made to families. Where can you support? Where can you remove barriers or provide a direct service? So our teams are working through workbooks. We have one of these for every department in our org chart. On the left-hand side, there's a drop-down menu of the standards. They will select one, and then they will write a corresponding standard of service on the right-hand side. As you can imagine, our volume is going to grow very, very quickly. What we'll do in 2 weeks' time is we'll pull those drafts together, we'll flip them, we'll organize them by standard, and we'll have a list of all the departments and their proposed service for that particular standard. Then as students exit and principals have some room to breathe, we will be bringing them in small groups aligned with the departments that own these services to listen to how principals are responding to these proposed services. We'll then send our teams back to do some drafting based on their feedback from principals, and we'll iterate, listening to their feedback on what they need. We've asked our departments to stay narrow, specific, and focused on schools. We don't want to see language that just says provide PD, for example. What exactly will you be providing? How often? What should schools expect? We don't want to leave anything up to interpretation and under-deliver. The next area of work, which is where we are right now, is the quality component. And if you recall, back in December of 2019, this is really where we started, and we've come full circle, because we very, very quickly recognized that we could have just revised the quality peer review, but that actually wasn't the roll up your sleeves, get into the messy, complex kind of work that needed to be done in order for our quality peer reviews to truly be successful. It's important before kind of launching a project to take time to pause and ask, how could this fail? And we've been hearing a lot from you as board members in our individual meetings as well, with your concerns about what might be lacking from what we have developed so far. And this is where we're really digging in. So I sought some guidance from the National Equity Project resources, specifically around the concept of liberatory design, which essentially says you create space for co-designing with end users, which is what we're trying to both practice and prepare for our system moving forward. Essentially, there are 3 reasons why equity initiatives fail. First, we fail to interrogate deeper causes produced by systemic oppression. Where is that space for interrogating those causes? Secondly, efforts don't often recognize how messy and complex of a challenge this really is. There are no neat solutions here. So where in our system-wide framework do we have space to embrace that messiness? And then finally, they are created in the context of dominant white culture or in traditional structures or in ways that are otherwise not built around all of the people in our system. So keeping these ideas in mind, we asked ourselves then, let's explore this sort of meaty middle between the quality ring and the standards ring. What is that relationship, and where can we really dig in based on what we've learned about liberatory design and why so many equity efforts do fail? And that brought us back to a familiar model. And this is called the 6-circle model. It's something that we learn as a part of our LFE, or Leading for Equity, experience with the National Equity Project that all of our administrators have been through. In this 6-circle model, we're asked to really be thoughtful about what are technical changes and what are adaptive or relational changes. And are we providing the conditions in which to bring the full circle together? Above the teal line here, these are the more quote-unquote technical changes. These are things like structure, pattern, and process that I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. We believe we've captured this sort of technical aspect of the work in the standard system. We're getting clear on expectations. The work below the line we see is really part of the quality system. The quality system is the only portion of our framework that is unscored. It is the perfect place to allow for that interrogation, that messy, that complex work to happen, if well designed. So you can also look at it this way. It's kind of the iceberg effect. The standards of practice are above the water line, or the teal line here, and they focus on the pattern, structure, and process. And you can read those descriptions for yourself, but what's most important is the bold underneath. The 3 areas are absolutely essential, and this is what we've heard from you and from our principals as well, and our teachers, but not sufficient to bring about and sustain change. Unfortunately, many leaders believe and operate as if these are the only components of work and bring about and support organizations and change efforts. So we're pausing now to say, what's below the line? And how can our framework support that? Below the waterline is something much broader, and this is where relationships live. This is how a team or organization values its people and their well-being, the level of connectivity among those teams and individuals, and the relationship between the teams, programs, and operational systems as well. Also below the waterline, so to speak, is information. And I love this first sentence. Information is like oxygen in a system. Today, we held a focus group with principals and we asked them, as a school leader dedicated to driving change, what information do you need about the quality of your school? How do you know? What kind of system would you need to support you? And identity. Human beings are meaning seekers. Our actions are driven by our set of values, beliefs, and sense of identity. So driving at a shared purpose, collective efficacy, really is what we're after. These three areas are completely interconnected. They are the vital nutrients of the living system, and they're really what helps our mindset around equity, our identity around our equity values, really grow. And all three of these are essential to the well-being of the whole. So to summarize, we can't just look at the stuff that's above the waterline, but really easy to measure. We need to dedicate time and space to those essential elements below the waterline. And that's where our work is driving us now. We've heard very clearly in our review of the standards work, which was a messy, complex portion of the system-wide framework, to get at clarity. That requires rolling up the sleeves and setting up priorities. But we've heard from our teams, and we believe it, that we need to do more. This is kind of a silly slide, but we started last January with some Sharpie marker drawings about where we thought we might go. And we have really kind of delivered and stayed the course on these things. We have developed the system of compliance, which we've actually changed our thinking around that beyond compliance to setting a standard of care, a standard of practice. And we've developed from quality into looking at examining the conditions that underlie the work. Our question here for quality is, how can we leverage other parts of the framework to reach our district goals? This is a familiar slide. This shows kind of the year at a glance, or 3 years at a glance for a 3-year school. What we've asked is, how can the quality peer review and quality system in general support the school in reaching their district goals? And so here's a beginning visual that's in our concepting phase. We've just listened to principals today. We have 2 focus groups with teachers tomorrow. We'll be making adjustments based on what we hear. We heard some great insight today from our principals. And so we'll be making adjustments to this concept, but we're in that phase right now. We're asking the question, when it comes to QPR revisions or quality peer review revisions, let's start with the large-scale event in mind. What would it look like to measure quality instruction, quality relationships, and strategic decision-making? We also understand from our principals, after listening to them for the last couple of months, that the event every 2 to 3 years is simply not enough. It doesn't provide them that information that is like oxygen in their system. So what would it look like to engage in more rapid cycles of inquiry? We've began concepting around the idea of having 3 times a year cycles of inquiry, and we've thrown out the idea of actually January through December, which aligns with their site-based budgeting process as a starting point. These cycles of inquiry would be opportunities in every school in our system to pull school leadership, their supervisor, and other district leaders together to look at clear data sets, whether that be observation or quantitative data, and really dig in. What do we know and understand about the school at this point in time? What are the priorities? What are your next steps? And how can we support you? It would look like this. We would have inquiry cycles happening 3 times a year in years 1, 2, and 3. And these would all serve as formative review and support for the school leaders. And a 3-year school would also have their large-scale QPR or quality peer review in year 1. So we would have not just one event, but a system of quality kind of asking us to dig deeper into that below the waterline work. So that's where we are right now in our progress. You're going to hear from me again next week and then again throughout the month of June, updating you on our progress and how our thinking evolves as we pull in more principals and more teachers into this thinking. As a reminder, these are the questions that we have focused on in the month of May and actually also back into April. We focused on continuous improvement in yellow, standards in purple, quality now tonight in blue, and accountability in red. And our purpose is to provide information for you as you seek to do your decision making as well. In the month of June, we'll focus again on the system-wide framework. We are near the finish line here. Next week, I'm going to share with you what we've heard this month and then what we've done as a result. We'll check in on our various work streams. On June 8th, we're going to focus on the school scorecard. There are some adjustments that will need to be made now that the system is more complete beyond simply a scorecard. We'll present recommendations for revision, and we'll also do a midpoint check in the standards of service. Where are we now, and what are they looking like? June 22nd, we will present the working drafts of the system-wide framework as a whole and share our progress over those couple of weeks. So I'll take any questions if you have them at this point in time.
I see no lights. Oh, there we go. Mr. Siegel?
Could you give me an idea of what, looking at quality below the water line will look like in the school? What sort of things will you be communicating and to whom?
I don't know that we know that yet. What we heard today was our principals' priorities about that information and who they need in their schools, providing them with that information as well. So I would say that we don't know yet.
The other side of that question is who will be doing that process of interrogating? I mean, I saw, central office, but
Yes.
I guess I'm wondering if we could.
Also not answered yet. Today, we asked them two questions today with regard to who. The first question we asked was, who are the most valued voices for you in examining the quality of your school? And then the next question was, who do you need beside you to drive change? And we kind of saw that in two kind of distinct questions, and we heard very thorough responses to both. We'll be debriefing about that information or that meeting tomorrow. We'll follow up rapidly with another focus group with principals next week to clarify and keep moving forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question.
Mr. Rollins?
If we could go back to slide 13, I hate to keep harping on this, but if we don't have a clear objective, if we don't know what our objective is, then the rest of it doesn't really follow very well. So using just actual numbers, and I understand that we're going to use the 2021 baseline, but the 2019, which is the last year we have data available, I think we had 14.5% third graders in categories 4 and 5, which I think is the meet or exceed or proficiencies if you're in category 4 or 5. So is the target to increase that 14.5% by 5%? Or is the target to get us to 19.5% if that were the baseline?
19.5.
Can we get this corrected on future slides?
Yes.
Well, I guess I would ask for a clarifying question what's said here is we would establish a new baseline. Just want to make sure that that's clear.
Correct.
I think what the concern is 5 percentage points versus 5% increase.
Oh, I see. I understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
I have a question, please.
Does Ms. Muhammad have any questions?
Yes, can you hear me?
Can you speak up, please?
Yes, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Thank you.
All right, so when you're referring, Ms. Detman, to the focus groups that are assisting with developing the system of accountability and even the standards of service, I heard you referring to principals and teachers providing feedback, and there's been some student focus groups that have taken place as well, correct?
There have not been student focus groups related specifically to the system-wide framework, no. We have a placeholder for a work stream for community and parents, but we have not yet started that work.
Okay, and that was going to be my next question, because by June or by the end of June, we're going to be going over the final kind of drafts of this framework, correct?
Correct.
So do we have an idea when parents and students will be able to provide feedback for this? Because I think that's very important.
I agree. I think it's very important. I was hoping to connect with you actually next week to see if we could get at least one strand started.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Anybody else? Seeing none? See you next week.
Okay, thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. All right. Before we move on to our consent agenda items, I'll ask each of the committee chairs if you have any sort of update or report on what's already passed through your committees. First, internal, external stakeholder committee. Do you have any update, Mr.
We have
Siegel?
no updates for tonight's meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Connor, anything from the performance monitoring committee on follow-up?
I'm looking for Mrs. Detman to give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. I don't believe so. Right. Right. We're done.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rollins, do you have anything from planning and development?
We do not.
All right, and I do not have anything from the governance committee, so we'll move on to the consent portion of our meeting, which includes items previewed by the board committee chairs during the committee of the whole meeting. Number 9, consent items. Performance monitoring committee. A, payroll. B, accounts payable. C, purchase orders. D, monthly cash and investment report from April 2021. E, financial results, April of 2021. F, RPS managed work change order logs. G, IFB 21-35, the printing of the student handbook and code of conduct. H, the 1-year extension for Galapagos and Jackson Charter Schools. Number 10, consent agenda items from the governance committee. The A, meeting minutes from 5/11 and 5/15, and the board, which was the board member onboarding retreat. B, contract purchase orders. The C, the IMRF credit authorization. D, workers' compensation settlement agreement. E, the Freedom of Information log. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any consent items board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? I see none on the floor. Ms. Mohammed, do you have any? No, thank you. Then I'm going to ask if you would please call the roll on the approval of consent items.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Abstain.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
The motion passes with 6 yeses, 1 abstain.
Thank you. We're now at the closed session consent agenda, including the following items. A, the appointment of Thomas O'Brien as a 10-month dean at Welsh Elementary School. B, the appointment of Robert Walton as a 10-month dean at Risa Middle School. C, the appointment of Braxton O'Hearn as a 10-month dean at East High School. D, appointment of Angelique Malone as an 11-month principal at Washington Elementary School. E, the appointment of Latanya Wilkes Daniels as a 12-month executive director of special education. F, the appointment of Tanel Barnes McNeil as a 12-month director of benefits. G, the appointment of Gregory Hodges as a 12-month assistant principal at Jefferson High School. H, the appointment of Ronnie Sturm as the 12-month program administrator for health services. I, the appointment of Tessa Hoftelin as a 12-month program administrator for special education. J, the salary adjustments for non-bargaining employees. K, the HR organizational report and addendum. Following closed session consent items for student discipline, unless otherwise modified below, the board adopts and accepts the hearing officer's findings and recommendations in the following cases in which students expelled or suspended are prohibited from being on school grounds and school-sponsored activities without the prior written permission of the principal. A, GDM 4379-21 is committed the violation of 310S, which is group violence, and is expelled for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year through the first semester of the 2021-2022 school year. B, GDM 4380-21 is expelled for the remainder of the 2021 school year through the first semester of the 21-22 school year. Number 13, the closed session consent agendum EIAs, A, GDM 8226-21, and B, GDM 8227-21. Is there a motion and a second to approve the closed session as consent items?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any closed session consent items the board members wish to have pulled for separate consideration? Ms. Pearson?
Yes, 12A and B, 13A and B.
Thank you. Please call the roll on the approval. Was there another one? I'm so sorry. I just saw that little green out of the corner of my eye. Mr. Connor?
Yep, 11J.
Okay. So please, seeing no other lights, we'll call the roll. The approval of the closed session consent items not pulled.
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
Yes.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
Yes?
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So 12AB and 13AB. Well, I know you have 11J. You want me to go in order? Okay. 11J. I was going in the order of the person who pulled them. I was trying to be respectful of that. Sorry. We'll go in order of the agenda. Apologies. 11J. I'd take a motion in a second.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. And closed session items are not open for discussion. So would you please call the roll?
Ms. Mohammed?
Abstain.
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Abstain.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
No?
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
The motion passes with 4 yeses, 1 no, 2 abstain.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Pearson, would you like me to take each of those separately, or can I take both 12 and 13 together for a vote?
You can take them together.
Okay, thank you. So I would entertain a motion for 12A and B and 13A and B. I've already read the items.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. There's no discussion, so would you please call the roll on items 12A and 12B, 13A and 13B?
Mrs. McCulloch?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Stanford?
Yes.
Ms. Pearson?
No?
Mr. Rollins?
Yes.
Ms. Mohammed?
No.
The motion passes with 5 yeses, 2 nos.
Okay. Thank you. We're now on to board member action steps. The only step I had was the request from Mr. Rollins to correct those slides in their system framework deck. Do we have any other action steps that we would like administration to proceed on? Seeing no lights and no suggestions and no further comments on an agenda, I'll take a motion and a second to
So moved.
adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned at 7:51. Thank you, everyone.